muted. Let's try this again. Hello, everyone. It appears my signal may just be a little shaky today, but today is Friday, October 23rd, 2020, and we are here for today's HR Moment with Menifield and Associates. I am really happy to be back at home. Things are going well. Today has been a great day for meetings, catching up, and doing some other things. And so today's topic is all about emotional intelligence. And so oftentimes people say, why is emotional intelligence important and why do we need it? And so I wanted to talk just a little bit about what we mean when we say that. Of course, we're not going to do a full teaching or course in emotional intelligence, but we'll talk about it a little bit. And so probably one of the more renowned authors in that space is Daniel Goleman and Richard Boyatzis, and I apologize if I mispronounced his last name. But when they talk about emotional intelligence, it is really describing the ability to recognize and understand not only emotions in yourself, but also other people. And then to leverage that awareness to manage your own behavior and your relationships. And so to put it in a more layman's term, I would call it a heightened sense of self-awareness. And so often what we'll say is that people who don't have that heightened sense of self-awareness, that they are not as mature in that capacity. And when we think about intelligence, so often we think about people's IQ, right? So there's a difference between reason and emotion. When we talk about IQ, and I believe I've had maybe one IQ test in my lifetime. Have any of you ever had an IQ test? And if so, I would love to hear, what you thought about the test, and there's been studies as to whether or not they're biased or not. But when we talk about IQ, we're talking about our cognitive abilities, right? And then EQ are emotional abilities. And so it has been said that EQ will get you through life, while IQ gets you through school. EQ has more to do with happiness and success in life. And IQ to some degree can be what you're born with. And so when we begin to think about what's the difference, and I'm not saying one is any greater than the other, but what I am saying is we need both. And as supervisors, and again, our HR moments are for everybody because we want everybody to grow and be better, but we're really targeting the people who lead and manage other people. Having a degree of emotional intelligence, I think, is critical. Because there are things that are said and things that are not said. And so having the capacity, again, to read, understand, interpret the emotions of others are really critical to our success in all relationships. Supervising people is about relationship. I just got off the phone with someone who I really cherish. I actually call her by name, Donna Cundy. She is an amazing woman. She is a coach and a speaker. And I am in a community with her for my radio show. And we were talking about, one of her strengths, and it really is relationships. And so I would describe her as a person who's really high on EQ, right? Or emotional intelligence, emotional quotient, because she can read the pulse. She has a sense of what people are doing, how they're feeling, and how to navigate that terrain. I know there have been, periods in my leadership journey, we'll just say, that my emotional intelligence was not as equipped or developed as it needed to be. But I am grateful for things like 360 surveys and leadership assessments because that type of feedback is what helped me to realize I needed to grow in that space. And so while I'm still growing in that space, I know that I've come a long way. And so, one of the things that Les Brown is known for saying is never make a point without a story and never tell a story without a point. So, let me give you an illustration of something that I actually experienced, which was an indicator of how sometimes supervisors and managers can miss the ball. So a few years ago, I was actually in a mailroom with an employee from a different division. And as I was observing how she was like slinging the mail, she was doing the postage meter. So just the way she was handling things and putting it down, she spoke, she was pleasant, but something was just off. Like I was like, I've never seen this person behave so borderline. I don't want to quite call it aggressive, but it was just clear that she was not in a quote unquote happy place. So I went to her department and I sat down with her supervisor and I said, hey, we chatted a little bit. And then, I eased into the subject. And I said, how are things going with employee A? And he looked at me with this deer in the headlights look. He was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, it would appear that she's maybe not happy. And he was like, oh, I hadn't noticed. And I'm thinking like this energy is oozing from her to such a degree that how could you not notice? But whatever. So we talked a few minutes. I went on back to my office, but he said, well, let me ask or check around. So then he spoke to his number two, which was the lady's direct supervisor. And this gentleman then shared that earlier in the week or something very recent, he had said something to her and she snapped at him. And so he was like, but I didn't think anything of it. I just figured she was having a bad day. And I'm saying to myself, when people who are normally cordial, the best people to be around, they're snapping, behavior that's not common to them. Again, their energy is, more abrupt. They're short with people. And nobody thinks to say, hey, is everything okay? So me being me, I called the person down to my office. I said, hey, I would love to talk to you, just check on you. I hadn't talked to you in a while. And she sits down at my desk or at my table, because I usually don't meet with people at my desk unless it's a very formal and it's going to be less cordial type environment. So we sit down. And as we sit down, I then say to her, I said, hey, I just thought I'd see how were things going. Are you okay? And I'm not making this up. Immediately, she begins to cry. And I'm thinking, wow, what's going on? And of course, she told me some things that were happening, and it all wasn't work, but some of it was work. She was very displeased with her work environment. She felt like she'd outgrown. She wasn't being challenged. She didn't have sufficient help. She had voiced these concerns. Nothing had been done. And then there were some other things going on in her personal life. So I listened, made some recommendations. About a month later, I actually brought her over to my team, but that's another conversation for another day. But the point is, I saw her all of 4 to 5 minutes, if that long, and knew something was awry. And the people who had been working with her every day were just clueless. To me, that's a perfect example when, as supervisors, we're not strong in emotional intelligence, because you shift the way you message, you shift your conversation when you can tap into and tune into what's happening with other people. And I'll even give you a personal example, because I think many of you know that personally I've been, dealing with some things. And I can tell, like I was out of town and I went home for the first time in the last couple of months. And it was my first real visit back since my dad had passed. And I could just feel my energy was different. And it's like if someone were to be around me, even if I don't say anything, if they are like connected with me and they're really clued in, they should be able to say, "Hey, is everything okay?" Or "How are you feeling?" Because sometimes I think people don't bring up things or talk about things because one, they figure nobody wants to hear about this or this is old news to them. Maybe people think I should be over this by now or whatever. But when you really know a person and you can tune in to their emotional quotient and how they respond, their reactions, their moods, and all that, it helps you navigate. And as supervisors, let's just be really transparent. You have to supervise not only the people who report to you, but there's a whole nother level of supervising up, right? You have to manage up the person who manages you. So again, getting clear on emotional intelligence is really important. And so there are 5 categories to emotional intelligence. And if this type of content is valuable, we can go deeper. So I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version because, again, we like to keep our HR moments between 10 to 15 minutes. So, of course, there's self awareness. Then, and that's just, having the awareness of your own emotions. Can you recognize them? Then there's self regulation. And we can consider that our self control because everything I feel does not need to be expressed, right? Then there's motivation. So, how do we drive to improve our, commitment, initiative? Then there's empathy. Do we empathize with other people or do we see other people being emotional and we be like, oh, okay, well, so anyway, because we want to avoid emotions. And I know a lot of people who would rather avoid emotion, but they are probably perceived by people as lacking empathy. And then there are their social skills. But all of these are components of emotional intelligence. And so, again, I think it's important that as supervisors, leaders, people in the organization, we really begin to think into what are some ways we can improve in this space. Of course, there's great books out there. I already mentioned 2 of the more commonly known authors in this space, but there's a lot of great content out here. But there's also workshops and trainings. And of course, if we can help you, we would love to do so. But developing this skill is something, again, that all supervisors should do. And so before I leave you, I think I've been mentioning my journal for a minute, but I wanted to show you guys that it is pretty close to being, on the presses. So I'm really excited. I really want to encourage you, if you've ever journaled or considered journaling, that you entertain. This is something for your growth because I really try to take you through a journey. It looks like I'm froze again, so I apologize. But I try to take you to a journey of not only how do you navigate being a supervisor in a space that's empathetic, that's supportive, that's accountable, that's empowering people and valuing them, but it's also taking you on the same journey so that similarly it will be reciprocated. Um, Again, supervising people is not easy. And so many people think they want to be a supervisor. Nothing wrong with it. But just make sure you know your why. Like, what is the real reason you're ready to take that next step? Because if it's only for the money, I am here to tell you it doesn't pay enough if that's your sole objective, right? So we want to equip you so that if you do embark upon this journey, you'll do it in a way that adds value to both the team, but also to you, that you'll leave at the end of the day and you'll feel fulfilled and motivated. I know a couple of people who've recently been promoted and I see them struggling. And every time I talk to them, I say the same thing. Please talk to your organization about training, right? You're great technically. You are the go-to person. You know how to do what it is that they need to have done, but you're not equipped yet to lead other people. Hence, they find themselves frustrated. They're often in tears. They're angry. They don't like their team. So equipping and building and equipping supervisors and teams is exactly what we do. So thank you, everyone. I didn't get any comments on here, but I did see some on the personal share. So hopefully we'll be able to address those. Again, my name is Angela Hooper-Menifield, and I'm with Menifield and Associates, and I'm also Chief Equipping Officer with the B.E.S.T, which is an acronym for Building and Equipping Supervisors and Teams, Supervisor Academy and Symposium. Have a great weekend, and we'll be back on Monday. Take care, everybody.